It's getting serious, folks. A group of students are now suing the federal government for giving any money at all, any public money at all, to Christian and Catholic schools. They're wanting to make sure that Christianity is labeled discriminatory, so it cannot have any public funds. I'm Dr. Duke, he's Alex, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Katie is off doing the mama thing, so Alex Newman is joining us today, and we start with a head-scratching and very dangerous lawsuit that is filed in the, I think it's it's filed out in Oregon. I think it's the Ninth Circuit that's going to handle this, and that's dangerous too. It's a claim against Christian colleges that Christian colleges violate the constitutional rights of students by not bowing to the LGBT agenda. So according to these students, the fact that the federal government is giving money to Christian colleges in very limited ways, obviously not the same way they give to public schools, that has to stop, says these students, because the Christian schools will not give up their biblical worldview, and the biblical worldview is, of course, anti-gay. Therefore, giving money at the federal level to Christian colleges at all for any purpose is anti-LGBT. This is a very serious lawsuit. And as I said in the teaser, the purpose here is to get Christianity labeled by definition as discriminatory.
Yeah, it's we've come full circle now, and this is exactly what people warned about in 2015 when the unelected tyrants on the Supreme Court invented a so-called right to a homosexual marriage. And it's incredibly ironic, too, because virtually all of the first 100 universities in America, including Harvard, including Yale, including Princeton, all of the ones that are considered to be so great, were started actually as Christian institutions for Christians to train ministers of the gospel to proclaim the truth of Christ throughout the world. Now we have come full circle, and now we're at the point where colleges aren't allowed to be Christian anymore. It's crazy. But I do have bad news for the tyrants hoping they're going to squash Christian colleges with this. The more you target Christianity, the more you try to persecute Christians, the faster the church will grow, the faster the truth will spread. And so you're digging your own hole.
Yeah, 33 current and former students at federally funded Christian colleges. These are students that went to Christian colleges now betraying those colleges, right?
Yes.
33 current and former students at federally funded Christian colleges and universities. So they're literally peeing where they live, right? They're willing to have their schools get much less money even while they're attending it. They're willing for the cost of their education to even go up while they're in school to make the federal government send a message that Christianity is institutionally bigoted. So 33 current and former students at federally funded Christian colleges and universities launched a historic attack on religious freedom by filing a class action lawsuit. The story comes to us from the College Fix. A class action lawsuit against the Department of Education. The lawsuit, Hunter et al. Versus Department of Education, claims that the Department of Education violated the First, 5th, and 14th Amendments of the Constitution. Isn't it great how when they want to shut down things like churches, suddenly the Constitution matters to the left? But this is really dangerous. And it's not surprising to me that it's happening the way it's happening. But ask yourself the question. Now that Joe Biden is president, and we have a radical left-wing critical race theory guy running the Department of Education, do you think the Education Department, do you think the feds will fight this? Or do you think they will join the lawsuit? I think that the Biden administration will turn around and agree with these kids. You mark my words, I will be very surprised if the Department of Education under Cardona, the new radical left-winger in charge of the Department of Education, I don't think for one second he's going to disagree with these kids.
No chance. But I really do find it ironic. I mean, it shows you the depths to which we have fallen, where the First Amendment can be cited in a lawsuit against a Christian college. Now, anybody who knew even rudimentary American history, which you would hope some of these overpaid lawyers would know that when the First Amendment was written and ratified, most of our states actually had established churches. The idea that it was intended to ban Christianity from everything is so ludicrous that only an uneducated ignoramus or a liar could possibly say something that
or
dumb.
an entitled brat.
Yes.
Goes back to the show we did yesterday where we were talking about some of these kids going to Christian schools and wanting those schools to stop teaching the Bible.
Yep.
Here you have a similar situation to this. It's really remarkable. These are obviously lesbian and gay. Many of them are lesbian and gay or transgender kids who personally chose to go to Christian schools.
Yep.
Chose it, knowing what those schools believed, and yet getting on campus and then immediately deciding that the school has to change its theology for me. This long 2,000-year tradition of biblical interpretation has to come to a stop because they were nice enough to take me in, even though I don't believe their theology. They made me feel at home. They gave me a chance to go to school at their college, and they invited me in. They didn't change their worldview.
Yep.
And so all that is negated. They are now my enemy. My job is to make them change. Think about the hubris and the arrogance of that kind of worldview.
Yeah, it is really intense, but it makes me think of the Roman Empire. I think these people are so mistaken. They think they're going to crush Christianity. They think they're going to destroy the church. They think they're going to re-educate Christians. And in fact, if you look at the times and places where Christianity has flourished, it's flourishing right now in communist China. There are more Christians than there are members of the Communist Party of China. The more wicked, the more they come out of the closet and try to persecute and shut down and silence Christians, the more they are going to cause an awakening among Christians and a revival.
Well, the College Fix kind of nails it. They say the lawsuit squarely takes aim at a central point of biblical Christian conviction.
Yep.
The idea that Christians are to love the sinner but hate the sin. And we learned yesterday in the Dr. Duke Show, that's a quote from St. Augustine. Christians who are redeemed sinners themselves should offer the grace they received in Jesus Christ to sinners while encouraging themselves and others to stop sinning. That vital distinction allows Christians to love others without condoning their actions. The lawsuit takes aim at this distinction. What the lawsuit is saying, you will not call us sinners. You will accept our sin as truth, and you will apologize for being prejudiced against us.
You will glorify our sin.
You will enshrine at the heart of whatever you do with Christianity our values. Again, it's demonic when you stop and think about it. There's no better way to look at this as demonic. If the devil could find a way to, from the inside, to completely gut Christianity, wouldn't it be this? In the name of inclusion, you can no longer have sin. Sin blames people. You can't blame people. So in the name of inclusion, Christianity, and look, this comes long before the LGBTQ. For how long have you had in American churches the prosperity gospel, the idea that people aren't really sinners, that there is really no such thing as hell, God's a God of love, he's not a God of punishment, he doesn't expect us to actually do the things he commands us to do. So the Christian church has a long history in America, certainly going back to the liberation theology days of the 1960s, of undercutting its own throat. It's the Christian churches, by their tolerance for these kinds of stupid arguments and their unwillingness to defend themselves, it's the Christian churches and the Christian colleges that put themselves in the way of this. They're the ones that are responsible for this.
Very true.
In the past, you would have just said, I'm sorry, but given that you are a practicing homosexual, we're not going to be able to allow you into our school because of this, right? Because when you allow them in, you say, okay, we're going to be broad-minded, we're going to allow them in, we're going to say, we may not condone what you're doing, but we love you and we want to try to minister to you. No, now they're ministering to you. You're the sick one, we're the normal ones, and you're going to change your tune to our melody or you're going to go away. That's exactly what they're being told in this stupid lawsuit.
So there's some good news for a change. The 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled unanimously that the Shawnee State University violated a professor's right to free speech and his free exercise of religion when it punished him for refusing to play along with the delusions of a very confused student at this university. So the Professor Nicholas Merriweather, he is a Christian, and he apparently misgendered, which is code word for said
Told
reality, exactly, used the correct pronouns for one of these students, he believes that gender is fixed. And so he apparently misgendered one of these students, and the university came after him. And now the courts have ruled that, nope, you cannot force him to play along with another's delusions. He has his right to free speech. The First Amendment protects him here, and his religion and his free speech. And a 32-page decision. So this is very bad news for those hoping that they were going to force every teacher, every professor, every American to play along with these dangerous delusions.
Well, it's not even like he used the wrong pronoun. This is a student. He actually referred to a student as Mr. instead of Ms., right? So a male student who is transitioning to a female, he called the person Mr. Merriweather apparently referred to a transgender student as Mr. instead of Miss in 2016 after the student complained. The professor was reprimanded in 2018 by the school. His win before a federal court, appeals court, clears him to sue to seek damages. Presumably that might have resulted from that reprimand. I would do it if I were him, not necessarily because you want to punish the kid or pile on, but if you don't push this as far as you can, that right is going to be revoked, right? You need to make an example out of them. It's not enough to win this case. You need a settlement.
Yeah, and he suffered real damages.
Yes, he did.
I mean, his career was affected.
Absolutely.
He was dragged through the mud. His reputation was smeared. He was punished by the university. I absolutely think that he needs to pursue justice in the courts. It's outrageous that people are being forced to play along with these delusions, and it's been settled forever that the government cannot force you to say something.
Well, and what's really scary is that he actually lost initially. A federal judge sided with the school. This is a federal appeals court. So it shows you how tenuous this is, right?
Well, we've got a lot of clowns in the judiciary.
We do. Merriweather claimed in his lawsuit that was originally dismissed in 2020 after a federal judge sided with the school. He insisted that his First Amendment rights were being violated, which is obviously true. Quote, to accede to these demands, the professor's lawyer wrote, I guess, to accede to these demands would have required Dr. Merriweather to communicate views regarding gender identity that he does not hold, that he does not wish to communicate, and that would contradict and force him to violate his sincerely held Christian beliefs. The lawsuit reads that the suit claims that the number of potential gender identities is infinite according to the left, and that there are over 100 different options currently available. How does one deal with all of that and still have free speech? And so, congratulations. Now, we'll see. The school may push it to the higher court, even a higher court, right? They may try to get it to the Supreme Court. So this may not be over yet. The school has deep pockets and lawyers on retainer. This is one professor. But this is at least a good sign. It should also be pointed out that the judge who wrote the majority decision, everybody on this court agreed. Right, so we know that the judge who wrote the decision was a Trump appointee, but every single judge on the panel agreed with this message. So that is a good precedent.
But think about how sad this is, Duke, that we are now at a place where we celebrate as a victory the fact that a professor isn't going to be forced by his employer, by his university, publicly funded, taxpayer-funded university, to lie. I mean, it's the fact that we now look at this and say, hey, a victory. It's a sad commentary on the state of affairs in this country. So, New York City, the state of New York, crazy thing going on there. The New York City's gifted program is now in the crosshairs of the unhinged, woke, racist mobs. They're very upset because apparently the gifted program, the special schools for gifted students, are racist because more European and Asian descent students qualified than Latin American and African descent students. And therefore, we need to eliminate the programs entirely so that everybody can be dumbed down to the same level.
It is amazing. I mean, so this is the old Christian hierarchy. You could try to pretend it doesn't exist anymore. You could try to bury it in history. You can never teach it to your kids. But there was a lot to be said for the 7 deadly sins. How much are we seeing of the 7 deadly sins in what we now call social justice? Envy was one of the pride, arrogance, right? Envy. This is low achievers, envious of high achievers, and trying to destroy their opportunities. This is envy. This is avarice. This is greed, right? This is sloth. get off your ass and work harder at school than trying to destroy the opportunities of people who are working harder than you. It's sloth. I mean, down the line, talk about lust and how we've enshrined sex for sex's sake at the heart of our elementary and middle school curricula. You go down the 7 deadly sins and you will see that what we're getting under the name of social justice is hideous, damnable sin. No other way of looking at it. So what do you got here? You got a consortium of activists, including celebrity lawyer and legal pimp Ben Crump. They filed an 81-page lawsuit against the state of New York, Governor Cuomo, New York City Mayor de Blasio, and other state and education officials, all because they allow some kids with higher aptitudes and higher potentials to take advanced courses. That's it. Yeah. You're allowing some kids to take advanced courses when other kids can't even pass the grade they're in. That's a problem. It's racism somehow. And as long as you allow gifted kids to do gifted things, you're being bigoted against slackers. Amazing.
Yeah, it really is a total repudiation also of what their supposed idol Martin Luther King said, right? We should be judged on the content of our character, not based on our race. And yet what these activists are saying is, no. Race needs to be a primary consideration in all this. And if you actually read the lawsuit over and over and over again, certain Asian students are overrepresented in these programs.
Whatever else this is, it is yet another example of the progressive left's war on Asians. We know why they hate white people. We know how they demonize white people. We know that white success is a thorn in their side. And now come the Asians, right? And the fact that Asians are successful even more than whites across the board, especially in the public schools, that now means Asian people are the enemy too.
Yeah, and so they're facing official discrimination in all kinds of universities now. They say, Asians might be the best ones to be admitted, but we're not going to accept them because we need more diversity.
This lawsuit basically insists that you are privileging white and Asian candidates over black and Hispanic ones simply on the basis of their academic performance. Gosh, you would think that schools would be concerned about nothing else, right? What is a school if it's not concerned about academic performance? It is a social justice cleaning mill. It's a grooming organization. It's not a school. And the very fact that they're so bold in their lawsuit to basically suggest that the purpose of school is equity, not academics, right? It's so become in our DNA now to believe that the purpose of public schools is gender gerrymandering, that they can feel very comfortable mentioning those Asians, right, who are overrepresented. How could you be an overrepresented minority?
Yeah, it's a good example of the Asian hate that we've been hearing so much about lately.
How can you be a minority and then be overrepresented?
That's a good question.
Then you're not in a minority anymore, right? And I would suggest to you how much oxygen have we given to black activists over everybody else? How much airtime, how much community funds, how much corporate sponsorships, how many affirmative action programs, how many critical race theories are now in the school? How much oxygen have we given to that 13% of this culture? Can you call them a minority anymore?
Yeah, and I mean the consequences of this too. People need to realize beyond just the stupidity and the racist undertones of all this. What happens when you have a society that doesn't value success, that doesn't value achievement, that doesn't reward and try to encourage people who are doing really well? These are the people who go on to do great things, who build the great buildings, who design the great bridges, who build the great companies. And now we're being told, nope, can't get any extra education, even though you're leaving everybody else behind in the government indoctrination center. You've all got to be dumbed down to the same level. It's a recipe for disaster.
And what the article rightly talks about, this, whatever else you want to call this, is anti-Asian bigotry. This is the war on learning. It is envy and it is sinful. It is, among maybe more than anything else, it is a war on merit. It is a war on the idea, the capitalist, the constitutional republic that we're founded under, the idea that if you work hard, good things will come to you. That's what they can't stand. That's what they don't like. Get rid of that. You get rid of the fundamental nature of the country. It's way more about that than it is a handful of Asian kids getting ahead in the culture. We were talking in this show about the 7 deadly sins and how prescient they were, that it's been 800 years, 1,000 years since we had the Middle Ages, and yet the Middle Ages and their scholastic philosophy understood one thing. There were certain kinds of sinful behavior, the 7 deadly sins, that were much more egregious than the venial sins that many of us commit every day, and that these were the kind of sins that could separate us from God. And when you look at what's happening in the name of social justice and critical race theory, I think we demonstrated pretty clearly that envy and pride and arrogance and sloth are being enshrined. Those 7 deadly sins are being enshrined at the heart of the new pedagogy, the new revolutionary critical race theory. And so this is St. Augustine week on the Dr. Duke Show during Instant Classics, a time where we challenge this. And so we're going to challenge this with somebody who knew very much about this and wrote a little bit about the 7 deadly sins in various places. It's St. Augustine, born in 354, died in 430 AD, one of the great first fathers of the church. He was a pagan. He was a man of Greek and Roman gods. He was a citizen of Rome. He was a devout attender of brothels. Prostitution was legal then in the Roman Empire, and he was addicted to it. So when he found Christ, largely through the mediation of his mother, the Blessed Saint Monica, who had found Christianity first, and she recognized that her son was too smart, too gifted, not to understand the promise of Christ. She finally convinced Augustine to look into it, and he became really the first great, outside of St. Paul, the first great Christian theologian. And so here's some quotes today from St. Augustus to keep our chins up in this time of the dominance of the 7 deadly sins. Quote, he says, speaking of sin in this, St. Augustine says, "We were ensnared by the wisdom of the serpent. It was the wisdom of the serpent that caused Adam and Eve to fall, but we are set free by the foolishness of God." How beautiful is that? God loved us in spite of our sin. God saved us in spite of his just accord. God found providence when we had doomed ourselves. We made our bed, and God foolishly refused to let us lie in it. Another word for foolishness here is mercy. How about the second quote? "God judged it better to bring good out of evil than to suffer no evil to exist." How beautiful is that? That God so valued our freedom of choice, because anybody who worships God because he has to, because he's programmed to, is a slave. Our God thought it was better to let Adam and Eve fall because he could bring the redemption of Christ out of that evil. Better that than to just get rid of evil and therefore get rid of free will altogether. And how about the third quote? "Beauty is indeed a good gift of God. God has made beauty in the world." And that's a good thing. But that the good may not think it a great good, God dispenses it even to the wicked. Look, how do you know that physical beauty, being pretty, how do you know that, while it's nice, is a very low virtue? Because God gives beautiful outsides to sinners and criminals as well as he does to law-abiding, faithful people. So don't take it too seriously. This is the kind of wisdom we're trashing in Western culture. Augustine was a titan of Christian thinking, and almost everything he said 1,600 years ago is still relevant today. All right, if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation. That will help us support our Patriot Club, and we will send you our signature tumbler. Visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. And just a quick reminder, please download our free, brand new Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project on your smart device. It's free, and then once you download it, you go ahead and hit allow notifications. We'll send you 18 new shows a week. You can watch them, you can skip them, you can delete them, but we'll get them right to you. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. He's Alex. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.